Hey darling hearts, I just wanted to make another video to follow up from a previous video I did about Yoni de-armouring, excuse me, cervical de-armouring and how to use your wand when doing internal vaginal massage or Yoni work. So I talked a little bit about it in that video. I talked a little bit in that video about the fact that we store trauma and emotions, memories, and potentially some kind of triggering things inside our vaginas. And I wanted to chat to you about how to recognize when you are in a trauma response while you're doing Yoni work, and a couple of little tools that you can use to navigate that if you do notice that's started to happen to you. And it may not, I don't want to make you fear internal Yoni work or de-armouring as a healing practice, because it's super valuable. And sometimes, there's not going to be any risk of this happening. Totally depends on the individual and your personal experience and your history, any trauma you might have. You might not have a response like this at all. But just in case, because sometimes it's pretty rare, but sometimes it does happen, I want you to be equipped and know how to recognize that. So basically, how you recognize that a trauma response may have started to come into your experience and into your body. It can be things like feeling really numb or dissociating. So just sort of tapping out of your body entirely. You might even be in the moment doing the Yoni work and the self-massage, and then next minute you're scrolling your phone and you don't have any memory of the time in between those two things. So that's like a really severe dissociative example. It might also just be that you feel really major resistance coming up or a need to stop, and it's just overwhelming and you just desperately want to stop the feelings or emotions that are surfacing. There might be memories that, that take you back into that space and you get kind of consumed by that memory. Anything that sort of feels triggering or like you might be getting a bit stuck, and that you're not in control anymore of your mind or your bodily experience. So, there could also be a really big heaviness or wave of exhaustion or tiredness sometimes when we're getting to be at our threshold or sort of teetering on the edge of our window of tolerance, which is a term, they speak about that in somatic experiencing a fair bit. We have this window of tolerance where within that we can handle things and cope. And then if we're pushing the boundary of that and being led into territory that's outside of our window of tolerance, that's when the trauma responses come in to go, fuck this, shut it down, we're not safe. So the window of tolerance is a cool thing to know about, because sometimes you just completely get out of it and then it's like, whoa, you're in the trauma response. And then sometimes you're starting to notice like the tiredness or the heaviness or just I guess like emotions coming up like shame and fear, and it starts to get into a little bit of a spiral. That's kind of when you want to start paying attention and it's possible that you could be heading into a trauma response or in one. Now, all of these things like the dissociation and the numbness and things like that, not necessarily like a certainty that you're in a trauma response, but it's possible. And these are ways that you can recognize potentially. And so then if you recognize that you're possibly in a trauma response, the ways that you can navigate this are really, really simple, but we don't want to be fucking with anything too complicated when you're in a really compromised state like that and your nervous system is in fight or flight or freeze. That's a big thing that can happen in trauma responses, is the freeze. That's the numbing, that's the dissociation, that's when you find yourself on your phone and you're not sure what's just happened. Everything's just been shut down for your protection. So a couple of little tools. Breath is obviously a really helpful one. If that's all you can do is just focusing on the in-breath and the out-breath, and slowing down your breathing, in particular the exhale, because the exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system and helps everything calm and relax. So just elongate the exhale if you can, and slow down the breathing and being, very mindful, paying attention to the breath. Excuse me. And then the next thing is you can bring in a little bit of grounding touch. So just like touching your body. There's a couple of places that are very grounding and bring a feeling of safety into the nervous system. So like holding your heart, holding your face, like touching your face and your head, anything that kind of works for you, just to bring some touch in and some awareness and connection back to your body. And then another thing you can do is opening your eyes, because sometimes if our eyes are closed and we're going into this spiral, it can be tricky to anchor ourselves and our presence into the here and now and into the body and into our physical environment. And having the anchor of knowing your physical environment, looking around, observing your surroundings, potentially even naming things that you're seeing out loud. So I see a pot plant, I see a turquoise leather couch, I see, just kind of observing the things that you're seeing as an anchor and to bring you back into the room. And then lastly, you could, if you're in freeze, bring a little bit of movement in. So it could even just be a little wiggle of your pinky finger or your toes, like scrunching your toes up. Can be a tiny bit of movement at first. If that's all you can manage, that's amazing. And just getting to the point where you're able to actually get up again and move your body and be anchored in the physical. And the other thing I would say is when you have kind of recognized you're in it and you're like, okay, like you've got enough wherewithal to do something about it, I would just say don't push into it too much and re-traumatize yourself. So don't think like, oh no, this is good, I'm really challenging my my blockages and I'm facing my fears and I'm dealing with my trauma. Like maybe it could be a bit much, so just go gently. And then on the flip side, don't just abruptly like end the experience, like jump out, like quickly kind of move on and halt the process, because the process that may be taking place where you're teetering on the edge of your threshold, within that window of tolerance, you might actually be expanding your window of tolerance or raising your threshold just a tiny bit by mindfully and lovingly moving yourself through that experience into a safer space in terms of your nervous system, rather than like quickly grabbing your phone or distracting yourself or jumping out of it. You can kind of transition out of the trauma response without making any sudden movements and being too drastic, and therefore potentially doing damage by that abruptness as well. So just, I guess, slowly wind down the session. If you do manage to get yourself out of the trauma response and you feel like it's still helpful to continue with the Yoni work or the de-armouring, great. Otherwise, just wind down the session and slowly exit that ritual space. And then once you've brought that Yoni work to a close and you've withdrawn, make sure you don't just hop up and rush off to the next thing or to go numb yourself out or, find something that's going to desensitize you, like TV or social media. If you can, afterwards, just be with yourself and do something that's very grounding and that feels very safe. So maybe being in nature, going and interacting with nature and the earth in your own way. You could have a bath, you could do some yoga, you could dance, something kind of embodied that keeps you anchored in your body. You could have a little cuddle with someone that you feel safe with. Pretty much anything like that that's nurturing and grounding and keeps you connected to your body. And just being really aware that you're not judging your experience or feeling shame or any of those really unhelpful self-bashing emotions around what you've just experienced, and the fact that you did have a trauma response, because there is absolutely no shame in that. And the last thing that I want you to do is to beat yourself up about it or feel shame or embarrassment or judge that experience in any way. So I hope that was helpful. Don't be too worried, because it's not super common that these trauma responses will happen with the Yoni de-armouring. I don't want that to deter you from giving it a go, because it's really valuable practice. But just in case, I wanted you to be really equipped and have the knowledge around your body, your nervous system, how it might start to respond if you do push yourself outside of that window of tolerance, if something comes up in the Yoni de-armouring that just takes you off guard. So if you haven't watched the first video about Yoni de-armouring and vaginal massage, check that out so you know what the bloody hell I'm on about. And thank you for watching.